I'll get it.
Thank you.
I don't know what, that's something new.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that could be used.
That's your official job.
Yeah, apparently that's the vice chair.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, the 4th of January. We're early this year. So we're just getting started. We invited the Ag Agency in to give us a little bit of state of agriculture in Vermont. It's been a long, rough year, and thought we ought to hear from folks that kind of look after things while we're, year round. So, Mr. Secretary, would you like to lead off? And,
Sure.
We don't have a real formal way, so whoever you'd like to follow, time-wise and material-wise, you can work you in. It's good to have you with us, and turn the floor over to you.
Well, good morning. It's great to be with you. Anson Tevis from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And we've got quite a herd here from the agency, so they'll be able to give more details on the various programs. So when it's appropriate, and decide who you want to go.
I think your folks may know all of us because we were here all last year, but we could introduce ourselves.
And we've got a couple of new people, so that might help.
Yeah.
Brian Collmore representing the Rutland District.
Irene Renner, Senator from Chittenden North, which includes Fairfax.
Brian Campion, Dane County.
And we have Richard Westman from Memorial County, be along. And I'm Bobby Starr from Maureen County. And Linda Lehman is our staff person. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much. As you might expect, I'm going to probably spend a good portion of my time talking about the flood and the severe weather that we've had since we last adjourned. And it didn't wait too long before it first hit us. So we had a lot of things that were pretty much out of our control and out of our farmers' control and our citizens' control, and that was the weather since we last chatted. And I want to go back to May actually to begin, because shortly after you adjourned, a hard frost hit many of our producers. So that included, apple blossoms destroyed, grapevines wiped out, fruit and veggie industry with some significant losses. This is the hard frost in May. There was a disaster declaration came from USDA, and UM Extension believes the damage from that frost surpassed about $2 million. So that's still with us.
And how, like that particular issue, I've already heard from some growers that it really didn't work out too good.
Yeah, there's lots of, I think the big issue with that is the insurance. And the insurance, the federal programs that are centered around insurance, our size and scale for some of those insurance programs that are available from USDA probably don't meet our needs. So there's been a lot of discussion about that with the frost, but also with the flood. Some of those programs are geared towards maybe bigger row crops. It's a little bit bureaucratic registering, and the return on investment sometimes is not. These are the producers who tell you, some of them tell you it's not worth the investment for that. So that's something that we've made some suggestions, trying to make more suggestions. We've got a task force that's been working on flood recovery, and I think they'll be looking at some of those issues. So that was the frost. So we had a little space there that was quiet. Maybe June, just called June, was okay. But then after that, flash flooding on July 10th and 11th, and of course know all the stories. Thousands of acres underwater, crops destroyed as they were just about ready to be put into market in the region. Feed for livestock underwater, thousands of acres of corn destroyed or damaged. Debris is a big issue as well. And farmers lost tractors, tools, and infrastructure. For a little bit of perspective, I'm going to go to the visual here, and Linda's going to show just a short video showing some of the images from July, and also there's one at the end from December out of Lamoille County where we had another event for some severe weather. So if we can just play that, there it is. There we go.
So this is Richmond. And this is the Winooski. So
Is that Route 2 there?
yeah, Route 2 in Richmond. This is the Conant farm. You'll see it from the interstate. Many of you travel the interstate, you'll see it. And this is going into Pine Island. So this is going out into, Colchester.
That's corn there on the left.
Yeah. So you can see all that corn underwater there. Now, this is the intervale. So they tried to harvest as much as they could prior to the flood. They knew it was coming. So that was those images. But this is what happened at the intervale. And there you go. So a number of farms down at the intervale. You can see here. Now, this is back to Essex and Paul Mazza's. It's one of our significant fruit and vegetable farms. He has pick your own operation, so you can see these are the apples. One of the biggest casualties was his blueberries were about to come in, and they were all underwater, so that crop was lost for the year. So you can see that it was his sweet corn. This is Cambridge. This is just the event that happened in July, but also happened again at the end of it. So there's a picture that happened again in December. So it just gives you a little perspective, and that's just a little snapshot of that Winooski and part of Lamoille, but there are many other regions across the state. So I guess the next thing is what happened after that. So after that, we worked with emergency management, working on the response. Of course, health and safety is first in any emergency. So we got through the health and safety part of it, and then the cleanup. There was a number of challenges getting around because many roads were wiped out, but there was some creativity with our agency, the co-op, trying to make sure that milk could get from maybe the farm to the plants, and maybe getting produce that was harvested, getting that to market as well. We had very little milk that was actually dumped, which was a good thing, but there was a lot of work finding alternate routes to keep the vehicles going, and working with the dairy division and co-ops and all of our people. We were pleased that we were able to save a lot of product from that. We launched an ag community survey, and this was really important to gather some of the scope and scale of the damage. We accepted responses from the ag community from July 30th to August 28th. It was open up to businesses, organizations, individuals who raise animals and or grow feeder crops for anyone beyond their immediate family. I think it's also important to note that Vermont had an extraordinarily difficult year just outside of the flood itself because of the consistent rain. You all lived it, you all saw it. But for many of us, it may have been an inconvenience and our plans changed a little bit, but it never really stopped raining all summer, which has a lasting effect. Some of the results, and Abby Willard, our Ag Division, Development Division Director, can go into more detail with that, but just a snapshot of the survey that we did. We had 264 responses. 16 million in losses, and 27,000 acres were impacted. Most significant damage, loss of crops meant for feed, and also produce farmers were hit pretty hard. Their crops, if you look at the timing in July, many of them were just about ready to be harvested, and they were wiped out. So all their expenses were just waiting for them to be harvested and get some income. So that was gone in July. I want to also give a special thanks to a number of people, including a number of nonprofits who stood up granting programs to get some cash to our farmers so they could possibly live another day. The Vermont Community Foundation, $1.5 million program. We worked with them to distribute dollars to farmers. And I want to thank all the Vermonters who've been donating to these organizations, whether it's buying Darn Tough socks or license plates. Some of those dollars are going into the BGAP program. And I want to talk a little bit about that. That's the Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program. We're calling it BGAP, state government. Agriculture was part of that program. This program was a $20 million program, and the governor really wanted to make sure farmers were included in this granting program that was managed by the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development. We're grateful for their partnership. Secretary Curley and Economic Development Commissioner Goldstein worked with us on making sure that farmers were included in that. As I mentioned, Abby will go into more details, but that program returned more than $3.7 million to farmers out of the $20 million. This, again, was not a program that was going to cover all the losses that were out there for the farm community, but it was money that could possibly keep them going and live another day.
Did you chase that to see what that 3.7 was used for?
Yeah, and Abby can go
Abby will
into
do that.
Abby can go into detail with that, and there were some some qualifications for that, but it was not a loan, it was a grant, and once it was first come first served, and we were fortunate to have at least that. But when you look down into the losses, it's a small fraction that's out there. And the severe weather really continued into the fall. There was a couple weeks, maybe 10 days, that it finally didn't rain and we got some sun, so there was a little bit of hope. And there was a lot of stress because at the farm meetings, farmers were telling us that they were not able to actually work. So you couldn't get a tractor into the field, so they couldn't work. And that, when you tell a farmer he can't work, there's a lot of stress with that. And that stress is still out there for living that. Finding feed for livestock on the minds of many, with no real system in place to find except word of mouth. Working with the Agency of Digital Services, we created a feed finder. This is one of the good things that came out of this. So it's a platform that's on our website where farmers can advertise feed for sale, where they can find the feed for cows, horses, sheep, goats. And we've got more than 100 businesses that are listed on that now. So if you're looking for feed, they can go there. We did have farmers who had some feed that may have been left over from the year before and willing to sell it to their neighbors. So that will continue. We also stood up a flood recovery task force. Their work is not complete yet. It's chaired by Dr. Roy Beckford at UVM, and also Nicole Dubuque is here from the agencies. She's working on that. And they'll have a series of some findings and recommendations in the coming weeks from that task force. And the other part of this has been working closely with our federal partners. They have resources and technical assistance that's really valuable. So USDA, NRCS, USDA Rural Development, FSA, John Robertson's shop, and of course our congressional delegation working with them. We had many tours to see the damage, get the response from the farmers, and all that work is still ongoing in Washington. And so we can kind of dig our way out of this natural.
Were there any parts of our ag industry that didn't qualify for any of these, or many of these loans, or? It seems like somebody mentioned to me, like with the frost issue, that there was very little or any money to help those people.
When the declaration comes, there is, most of it is tied to either emergency loans or refinancing their existing loans. The federal government does not have anything that is direct payment. That discussion, I think, is still underway in Washington. From time to time, Congress has had kind of I'll just call it a disaster bill that goes through, every state. I think it's this year, so you had fires, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, all this kind of stuff. So at some point there, in years past, there has been a bill, and there could be, in that could be direct payments, but that has not come yet. That's something I think that's
So,
being discussed. But anything that's come out of the federal government to date has been mostly either, helping with, debris cleanup, which is not an easy process. It has to be pre-approved and whatever through USD NRCS, and some loan programs. But there's hope that there could be something, down the road with the federal government. But stay tuned on that.
and will that frost that we had early on, will that affect trees next year, or is that just a one time?
I think my discussions with, if we take grapes, for example, they think they'll come back, and a lot of that stuff will come back. Some of the interesting parts of if the wine industry, if they do qualify for reimbursement for the insurance, they only reimburse the grape. They don't reimburse the wine that's going to be lost. The value added is so they'll have a ripple effect. They're using next year's wine will be different, and I think some of the winemakers had to import juice to meet because of the loss. And I want to get this right. It's been so long. The farther away you were from the Lake Champlain, it was the better. Because if you take Shelburne, the Shelburne Vineyard, if you look at it, some of the grapes that were down closer to the water survived, but the ones that were closer to Route 7 did not. And they, inward, like Windham County with the apples got pretty damaged, around that anyone who's sort of away from the water. But it was a really significant hard frost, and that one came at the wrong time too, because everything was, greening up, starting to, the blossoms were there on the apples. Some of our pick your own operations, they did open, but they managed it a little differently than they had in the past. Maybe not as many people. They were allowing into the orchards at a time, so they managed it differently. But my understanding is things will come back next year, whether crop price is not perfect damage.
And then I think another issue that we've heard about was the flooding in Christmas trees.
Yeah, we had some damage to that with Christmas trees. One thing about Christmas trees, the pandemic impacted that as well. Go back in time, it was an activity a lot of people did, so a lot of people went back into cutting shoes. And it takes 7 years for mature. I want to say 6, 7 years, 8 years to have them mature. So you're seeing some of the pick your own operations close their operations. They're not going right up to New Year, Christmas Eve anymore. They run out. So they're having to manage them really differently. And there were a few spots that had, again, too much water. But we do need, there is a need out there for more Christmas trees. If anyone's thinking about wanting to start a few acres of Christmas trees. Not without a lot of hard work, though.
not just 2 weeks. It's a lot of intensive work that's done during the summer, trimming, mowing, watching out for pests. But I think there's a little concern that we need more trees to meet the demand. But the pandemic put a lot of people out and harvested a lot more. So they had to pull back a little bit. So, if you want more deeper dive, I don't know what order you want to go in and share, but Abby's here. She can do a deep dive on BGAP and tell you where the money went and who qualified. And
That'd be fine.
so what I like, by the way, I'm impressed with the chair. You've got a nice chair. It's much better than my chair.
Probably be better, if you could take that with you when you go around the committee.
It's pretty comfortable, so.
Don't give him any ideas. You'll be stealing all our chairs.
Morning.
Morning. Well,
Thank you. Yeah, Abby Willard, Ag Development Division Director at the Agency of Agriculture. Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about more of the details around the flood and then share some of the activities, the economic development activities that the agency, that the Ag Development Division has either participated or led on. If that would be of interest. Okay.
sounds good.
Great, I'll start with the flood side. So as Secretary Tebbetts mentioned, we did a survey at the end of July, so put it out a few weeks after the flooding occurred, lasted for about a month. We received 264 responses. What we learned was it was really early in the process of businesses identifying what their actual losses were, but their estimate was 16 million, as Anson said, and 27,000 acres impacted. So just for reference, that's about 3% of the state's total ag acreage impacted by the July storm, and then the preceding weeks of ongoing rain and saturated soils. The survey results showed losses in every county, mostly impacting small farms, but across every sector. So we saw Christmas tree survey respondents, egg production, produce, maple, livestock, dairy, and field crops, all impacted by the flooding events. 50% of survey respondents anticipated feed shortages at some point in this growing season that just finished. More than 50% anticipated that their cash flow would go negative within the next year. And in a slightly smaller percent, around 48%, anticipated that their cash flow would be negative by December of 2023, so the month that just passed. What was one of the more shocking bits of information, in addition to just the economic injury that the industries experienced, was that 70% of survey respondents didn't have crop or livestock insurance. And so it really put this fine point on the need for immediate relief assistance to support the industry. So they were not likely to see federal crop insurance step in and provide the support that they needed to cover the losses they experienced.
Is that insurance area is expensive, or?
I am by far not the crop insurance expert, but my understanding is not so much, I think the cost can be prohibitive, but it's more that the insurance system is not designed for diversified crop operations and the scale of farms that we typically have in Vermont. So we do have farms that have crop insurance in Vermont, some of them that were also flooded. The question becomes whether they actually receive a payout based upon the way that insurance captures the loss. So it's by track. And so I know in conversations immediately after the flood with some farms that had insurance, that if a tract of land had like a high part of the land and the lower part flooded, but the high portion of that tract of land didn't flood, it needed to be 50% of the tract impacted. And if it wasn't, then even those acres that were underwater and totally impacted didn't qualify under their plan.
Sounds like a typical insurance plan.
Yeah, it doesn't always work when you need it to. Yeah.
Well, it's written so that it doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think, what we experience, and this is sort of where comparing the survey data to what we learned in the business emergency gap assistance when we saw applicants there, was that businesses just woefully underestimated what their losses were. And a lot of that insurance payout would happen based upon yield, which they couldn't determine until they harvested. So that didn't happen until October, November, when they were putting in their corn crop and trying to get a sense of how much of a yield reduction did they experience, and then they had adjusters come out and tell them whether they were eligible for their payment or not.
See, in a normal business, if you have a loss, you can deduct that from your taxes.
Right.
But if you're already at a point where, like most farms, you don't pay much in taxes, there isn't anything to deduct it from. So, it's a lot different than a private business. Usually you make a profit. So if you have a loss and it's not covered, you can deduct that loss.
Right.
But if you're already at an even keel, then you get a credit toward another year, which would probably be worse than the year. Yeah, it doesn't,
Yeah, I think what we heard was just a lot of frustration about the lack of immediate support for businesses that experienced damage and losses during the flood, whether that was, federal government sort of not having the immediate response and stepping in, insurance programs that they had hoped to rely upon. And again, majority did not have a crop insurance that covered flood losses. So then that's when the VGAP program was stood up by the Agency of Commerce in partnership with the Agency of Ag. We reviewed all the agricultural applications. So there's reviewers in this room. So Nicole and Cheryl and myself, as well as 4 others within the agency, reviewed applications that came in. So we received, the application opened on August 3rd that announced $20 million was available to cover physical damages. So loss of real estate, which could include land, inventory, which could include crops and feed sources, and then equipment and machinery. But that it only covered physical damages, so it didn't capture any of the economic revenue loss that businesses experienced. So in the ag sector, that was really huge. So for a business a CSA that lost all of their crops that then had nothing to sell to their CSA customers or to the farmers market, that loss was not captured and considered a loss within the VGAP program. Or if you were a horse operation that offered lessons and your facility was shut down for a month, you weren't compensated for those loss of riding lessons. Or if you grew flowers for a wedding and you had to cancel all of your weddings and all of your markets, if there was no capturing of that economic revenue loss as a flower producer. So there were many, many operations in that circumstance that felt like this program was valuable, but the fact that it was limited to physical losses meant that there was a huge amount of damage experienced by their business that wasn't realized. The VGAP program also only covered originally 20% of your losses with a cap of $20,000. At the end of September, it was recognized that there was only $6 million in applications, and the thought was, let's lift the cap and raise the percentage from 20% to 30% of physical losses that were net uncovered damages. And so that decision was made on September 21st. And we started to see a lot more applications come in. And then when the application closed on October 27th, about a month later, the program was oversubscribed, which meant that there was more applications than the $20 million that was available in the program. So in the end, agriculture received 163 applications, and we awarded 132 awards, totaling $3.7 million out of the $20 million that was available overall. Some figures to sort of share in comparison. So the VGAP program received 712 applications in total, So 23% of those applications were ag applications. And across all the BGAP applications, they claimed $152,000 in total net damages. Agriculture's was just under 20 million. So that's about 13% of the losses were claimed by the agricultural sector. When you're looking at the awards that went out, there were 530 awards across all sectors. So manufacturing, retail, human services, agriculture, restaurants, etc. 132 of those awards, as I mentioned, were agriculture, which represents 25% of the grantees were ag producers. And the 3.7 million out of the 20 million, that's about 19% of the awards went to the ag community. And I will even just caveat that our agency only reviewed applications that were direct producers or on-farm processing. Anything that was off-farm processing, so if you were a dairy producer, a dairy processor that didn't actually have the cows and produce the milk, your application was reviewed by the Agency of Commerce, not by the Agency of Agriculture. Or if you were a hemp or cannabis processor, but you didn't actually grow the crops, then again, your application was reviewed by the Agency of Commerce. So agriculture's food system overall received greater than those numbers that I shared. Those numbers that I provided are just what we as the Agency of Agriculture reviewed. So agriculture even had a bigger kind of collective piece of the pie, I would say. BGAP awards went to 13 out of 14 counties, so there were no grants that were made in Grand Isle. The largest reported damages came from Lamoille, Washington, and Windsor counties. The largest number of grants, though, were awarded in Washington, Chittenden, Windsor, Orange, and Orleans. So that's where a majority of the grant awards were made. One thing that the agency has just started to do is sort of compare the data from the survey and the BGAP grants that were made to sort of see what amount of overlap there was between those that applied, or those that documented damage and then those that applied for a grant award. There actually wasn't that much overlap. There was only 66 applicants, 66 businesses that filled out the survey and also applied for BGAP. So when we're looking at those numbers, preliminarily, it looks like there was 359 businesses collectively that either demonstrated damage or applied for BGAP relief assistance, totaling over $45 million in net losses. And when you look at the full food system, and we capture restaurants and food manufacturers, it's more like $65 million in total damages as a result of the torn floods. So huge impact on agriculture and on the supply chain of food systems overall.
Did you survey to see if we lost any of these small farms that went out of business, or is there any record of that?
It's a good question, Senator. We have not followed up with another survey to see how many either did indeed go into negative cash flow in 2022 or actually closed their businesses. I think any of us that reviewed applications can share that they are very dismal stories to review and photo documentation of big losses. So, that imagery that Anson just showed the flood waters. It's actually even more devastating, honestly, to see what the scour and the loss was once those waters receded, and you see, land just ripped back and crops totally lost, and the stream bank erosion and just the amount of field damage that occurred and the debris that remained. So I think some of the impact on businesses' viability still remains to be seen. But I can't answer the question of if I know of any business that actually closed as a result. I will say, just up until early December, I was getting a weekly call from a vineyard that said, I am waiting for my BGAP check. We're surviving on credit card, debt to kind of get through. So again, as Anson mentioned, the program didn't cover any of those value-added products. So it would cover the value of your lost grapes, but not of your lost wine crop that you're either going to have as poor quality or unable to produce. And the same happened for many other crop farmers. As an experience, the experience that they had was that we would only cover. So let's say that the flood happened in July. Maybe they'd taken first cut, maybe not. And so they, would apply and say, well, we're not gonna get any cuttings for the rest of the season. The program really only covered the loss of one pay cutting, not second, third, and fourth cuts, because those felt like projected losses. And so again, the program didn't make any operation whole, and it did not cover all of their physical losses even. It just sort of was a bit of support, hopefully soon enough, that would allow them to use those resources to buy additional feed or make infrastructure improvements. Or we also know many businesses made business shifts, and they talked about moving their operation to a different location or to a higher ground upon their existing farm if they had that privilege. But we know that there's going to be long-term feed quality impacts, and therefore herd health issues and reproduction issues and field production fertility challenges across sectors for subsequent growing seasons and years. I think others in this room may be able to speak to that better than I, but I think again some of this lasting effect will be in the future and kind of long lasting, unfortunately. Maybe on a brighter note, just really quickly, I have a bunch of colleagues here in the room that also want to share with you what they have been working on for the last year or 6 months at least. I just wanted to share some of the opportunities that hopefully exist. So Ag Development Division does a lot of economic development programming, or at least works across the agency to support economic development programming, and in the form of connecting businesses to resources, doing a bunch of grant making, a lot of outreach and education, and then marketing collaborations. So year over year, we continue to bring in more resources and have more dollars to put out to the ag community. In 2023, it's like $27 million compared to 2022, which was just under $11 million. Compared to 2021, that was around $3 million. So the amount of economic development opportunity that we have within the agency continues to quadruple annually, which is really pretty impressive. And so we were able to stand up some new state programs and bring in some additional new federal resources. So many of those state programs included one-time appropriations that this committee was a part of supporting last session. So about $9 million went into 3 new programs, one supporting meat, maple, and produce, one around small farm diversification, and a third around the organic dairy relief assistance program. And then the development division has, 8 to 10 established programs that is an additional $4.5 million annually that go out to farm to school, to specialty crop, focusing on trade show assistance. What else might those programs be? The Vermont Dairy Promotion Council resources that we received, the Working Lands Program, fairs and field days. So a variety of different sectors and ways that we're investing in economic development for agriculture across the state. So I'm happy to go into any detail about any of those programs. It may not make sense to do it today.
There was a meeting this morning in regards to Franklin County field days. And is there any advancement on what's going to happen up there, or do you know that?
I don't know. I think our team's testimony this morning was mostly around kind of the stay that we have on their capital grant and their stipend over the last couple of years, to hopefully be able to support Franklin County's investment in infrastructure improvements in a different location once they're ready for that. But again, others may have more update to share with you about what the future of Franklin County Fair and Field Days is.
Yeah, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you all for the BCAP and stepping up and helping out. I think that's great. It would appear that insurance is, and I know you're not an expert, I don't know if there is an expert. But I understand if the cost of my premium is going to be exceeded by the benefit, if I ever had to kind of depend on that, that does make some sense business-wise. If it's opposite, why would I even bother taking out any insurance? And I have a feeling, again, mostly as Secretary said, because of the scale that we're talking about in Vermont, that that's probably what drives a lot of people to decide not to have the
Right.
insurance. And to the chair's point earlier, and I guess I sympathize to some degree with insurance companies. I mean, it's a business to them too. So anecdotally, for instance, in Florida, where they've got hurricanes and all sorts of bad stuff happening more frequently, there are fewer insurance carriers that even are doing business down there, which drives everything up. And there literally are people that can't afford to have insurance anymore. And the insurance companies are going broke there because they have losses that exceed the premium. So I don't know whether the Farm Bill's still being debated, I think, in Washington. Are there provisions therein that have anything to do with sort of taking a look at this so that there's a sweet spot so that, you know, the insurance companies can still make a reasonable profit, but that
Right.
people that take advantage of it feel a little bit safer because they're covered, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, again, I don't know that I'm the best person to answer that question other than to say, this is one of the first times I feel like as a Vermont Agency of Agriculture, we have data to be able to speak to the amount of uninsured producers that exist in our state. And given the amount of natural disasters that happened around the country, I suspect that other states feel like they also have more information than we've had historically. And so, you know, we've certainly brought this topic up to the congressional delegation. I'm sure that that's happening in other parts of the country as well, so that hopefully we actually could have a conversation around crop insurance nationally that might make a difference.
Yeah, okay.
Well, one of the issues that is an on-the-ground issue for, you have to be able to, with the crop insurance for people that have, we'll say corn, for example, and I rode around a field in combine with local farmers. Even though it got flooded and there was something in the field, they had to go in and cut the crop. And they have to use that crop for something. It, you know, you couldn't stand outside the combine because there's so much dust and everything everywhere when they're cutting, because you have to be able to produce a number of what you cut off versus what your
Right.
losses were from last year. And they spent more time cutting in places that had flooded that they got virtually nothing off. It would seem that from a practical sense, it all just didn't make that great a sense. You know, so for people that did have insurance that were having to go on and cut this, and now they're gonna feed that to their animals, and you talk about, and I wonder, is it good for them? You know, from a practical sense, that might be someplace that you might be able to talk about what this looks like going forward. That if you're going to have meetings talking about how this all worked,
Yeah.
and could we do better?
We heard many of those same stories, and again, there's animal health and crop specialists in this room that are far better, I think, able to respond to that question as well. It's certainly a conversation that's coming up in the Ag Recovery Task Force. We recently heard from Heather Darby, who's been in contact and had surveys of many of the nutritionists across the state, and it's grim. Like the feed quality is poor. There is bacteria growth. They are not feeding it. Those that are feeding it are seeing other health implications to their animals. Like, yes, what you're describing about, you know, feeling forced to harvest and you know, damage equipment to sort of show and demonstrate what that reduced yield is, didn't make sense, and then having a feed source that you're not comfortable to feed to your animals is a
We run around all day long to get one truckload when,
Yeah.
you know, literally acres and acres. It just seems crazy.
Yeah. And I feel like, again, when we were meeting with or talking with, you know, hundreds of these BGAP applicants, we weren't able to get the money fast enough. We couldn't answer some of the questions that they had about insurance or about what do I do with my crop, or do I feed it, or do I, there were so many questions, technical questions that they had for us collectively in the ag sector that were very, very difficult or impossible for us to answer. And I think it's just, for me personally, it's just this indication that like we have not been in this place that many times enough to know how to have a plan and have the resources to be able to respond and help businesses,
Well, they,
survive through it.
just to add to the difficulty, they couldn't sell the corn that they cut off
Right.
for commercial, but they are expected to feed it to their own animals, which is just
Yeah, I feel your frustration.
yeah.
and I think our
The
whole
issue
agency
needs to
feels
be
it.
raised with somebody somewhere.
Yeah. So I'm gonna wrap here in just a minute. I just wanted to say, in addition to the one-time state appropriations that were brought into the state, there was also an additional $13 million of federal dollars that came in that are focused on exploring regional markets, the continuation of the Dairy Business Innovation Center, which you're well familiar with. They received their 5th round of $7 million, kind of bringing the total in that center to almost $46 million available across the Northeast. Lots of focus on new funds for infrastructure across the supply chain. So looking at the middle of the supply chain. So after a crop is produced, before it makes it to retail, how do we support that middle of the chain? We've talked a lot about that in this committee in the past, about distribution or processing or storage. So our agency received $4.5 million to support that middle of the supply chain work in the next couple of years. There's a lot more that I could talk about. I'll end by just saying the last 6 months was also spent a great deal of time thinking about the future of agriculture and about the viability and some of these issues, Senator Collmore and Westman, that you're bringing up about like what is the future and how do we support businesses going forward, whether it's in the Farm Bill, et cetera. And the Future of Ag Commission submitted their final plan to the governor in November. So after 3 years of submitting recommendations, so hopefully we'll be able to share that plan. There's a food security roadmap that will be released later this month that talks about how we can be positioned as a state to end hunger by 2035 and the role that agricultural production plays in that vision and in that plan. There's a New England Feeding New England report and vision around how do we access regional markets and ensure that as a region we're thinking about how do we feed ourselves so that by 2030, 30% of the food produced in the Northeast region is consumed in the Northeast region, which requires bringing an additional $1 million of land into active ag production, most of which will happen in Vermont and Maine. So a huge pressure on Vermont to continue to be an agriculturally producing state and thinking through the opportunities that exist to make that happen.
Mr. Chairman, ask a question on that. So the 30 by 30,
Mm-hmm.
is that just sort of a loose kind of agreement between New England, or are there some kind of statutory requirements?
It is loose,
It's loose,
yeah,
okay.
and it's more of kind of a
Goal.
collective vision and
Yeah.
a goal, and then thinking about strategies and investments and how do we get there? So like, how do we make that happen through thinking about consumer preference shifts, looking at increasing production, looking at how do we access regional retail markets, so getting more local product into retail grocery establishments, which is where most consumers do their shopping. So
Right.
again, kind of just like bringing all those pieces together into a vision and a plan.
Does that include fish and?
It does.
It does,
Yes,
okay,
because it's
so,
Northeast regional, it captures all that kind of coastal
interesting,
seafood.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
If we don't figure out how to keep the Winooski River in the river, we lose Champlain Valley corridor, that rich land up through there. We aren't gonna be feeding anybody from there, so. When, it's gonna be important to try to figure out how to keep the river in the river rather than letting it run where it may. And I know down through Lamoille County, that is the Lamoille River. I mean, all that rich land along the river. It's sad to see what, in your slide that you
Yeah.
showed of, the Champlain Valley, pretty bad. But we have Ellen Keeler coming in. She works on some of that food supply stuff.
Great.
So,
Yeah, Ellen can talk about the food security roadmap, New England Feeding New England and the Purple Plate efforts. Yeah.
Any other?
Who do we want next? You have a great
Um,
group to choose from.
I don't know, Nicole or Evie or, doesn't matter, who would blend in?
Who wants to go
next?
next?
Doesn't matter to me. I mean, thanks. Cheryl's taking my coffee.
You
It's
going
a really
for it?
nice chair.
I can go for it. I'm gonna be quick. I don't, Nicole, did you for the record?
Yeah.
COO. We have added, I don't have much of a presentation, because all these folks are doing the program work. But what, as Anson talked about, we've been really focused on recovery since July. So the Ag Recovery Task Force is something that I have been co-chairing with Dr. Roy Beckford from UVM Extension. So I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of what we've been doing in those meetings, if that would be helpful. So we have folks from all over the state and all different partners that we work with in ag that have joined us. We also have members of FSA, USDA. We've got a really great group, and so we've been working together on what was stood up right after July and what the recovery efforts have been. I know Anson went into detail, so I don't want to repeat too much, but it's been a really good way to be able to establish all the resources, and we've been adding them to our website for people to access. Dr. Beckford and I are working on a report right now, which should be complete by the end of this month, I think, with recommendations from the task force that we've broken down into a few different categories. So one is farmer empowerment, which is really a lot of the things that Abby has been talking about. Then regulatory recovery and how we can look at resilience strategies for the future, because that is obviously an issue for many farmers. And then we also are looking at government systems so that we can address and make recommendations on some of the issues that we talked about, specifically with crop insurance and other federal programs that have been difficult to access. So that's the big thing for me. I've also been working with other agencies across state government on recovery. Touch on?
This is, I don't know if you were in the chair last year, but
I was.
I think this is the new Diane. This is the new
Yeah.
Diane.
1 year in and that's still my name.
I
know.
But tremendous experience in the Agency of Human Services. So she's the state government. She's been helping us in a lot of areas, whether it's childcare for farmers, whether it's housing for farmers, and farm worker housing. So those she brings a wealth of experience that we try to get out of the silos, no pun intended here in ag, but we try to get out of the silos and work on this. We had some issues that Nicole's been able to help us because of her experience in services.
We've added a lot of resources to our website. We've definitely gotten some inquiries on social media and others from people who are struggling with navigating childcare, being that a lot of farmers are self-employed and not understanding how to do that. So we've partnered with DCF and been able to offer some resources there to help navigate. And then also Scott Waterman, who's part of our communications group, was able to stand up kind of job posting forum so that we can advertise farm jobs on our website, which has also been really great.
Well, thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, good to see you. Evie, you want?
I'm just gonna move around.
Right? We have the chairs.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm Evie Flory. I'm the Food Safety and Consumer Protection Division Director. And I also manage our dairy program within that division. Our division is the biggest within the Agency of Agriculture, and we have a lot of inspectors doing field work. So just flood related items. We spent a lot of time in our division assisting, whether it was with produce, which is a section of one person, assisting almost every vegetable or fruit grower in the state that was impacted by the flood. Each situation was unique, and so it took a lot of technical resources and time to address what has to be disposed of, what can be sold. So that was a tremendous amount of work done by Tucker Diego. Within dairy, my life turned into almost felt like a dispatcher for milk, figuring out, communicating with the co-ops and the plants with where milk was, where it needed to go, when did it need to be picked up. And through this process, coordinating with V-Trans, it ultimately ended up, instead of me telling the SEOC like what we needed, I was given a contact to give updates of like where our priority roads issues were. Some issues that were identified was the map that was put up to show where road closings were and other things only highlighted state roads and not towns. And so that was an issue for milk getting picked up and knowing like which routes to send trucks. They would look at the map, the dispatchers would send it out, and then there'd be town roads closed and other things like that. It worked very well with being able to have direct contact with V-Trans, and I hope that's something in the future that our agency can maintain when we have these disasters, to be able to keep milk from being dumped. So we were successful in those efforts. We had inspectors going out with milk truck drivers and scouting out roads while they were pumping milk, so that they could figure out what was the next route to the next farm. And it saved a lot of time, and it saved the milk truck drivers from getting stuck on a road and not being able to turn around and other things. That's the first time we ever did something like that, and it was extremely successful. So that's something that we will look at in the future to do. And our New England colleagues have actually reached out with how we handle this, and that's something that they will look to implement within their own states as well, assisting with certain routes. So other challenges we had, we're dealing with wells or water sources that were flooded over and contaminated water. And so for like our meat processing facilities, for dairy, if they had contaminated water, they couldn't operate. We were able to assist them like with these issues, getting water samples to our state lab, getting those things done. The biggest challenge area we had was in the Morrisville area. Their water, for those that were on municipal water, it did not pass for a significant amount of time, and that was due to infrastructure challenges there. So some of our businesses in that area that were using municipal water could not operate for multiple weeks because of that issue.
They were held to a different standard.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, they were held to a different standard. They sent their samples in before everybody else, and they were held to a different standard. So people in Morrisville would argue vehemently with you about when businesses could open and when they couldn't versus other areas. It was a real problem.
It was a frustration. We had one dairy plant impacted from this, and we had one meat processor that they were delayed being able to process until there was official past water results. So,
I've always known there was something wrong with the water.
They were the first to send their sample.
What happened to Rich?
And the standards were different.
so what I was told was infrastructure issues. They were having trouble with getting samples passed, but for us, there has to be a past water sample that's touching all the equipment, everything that's handling the food and for cleaning, and that's
And to be clear, it wasn't agriculture that the problem was with.
appreciate that.
That's all been taken care of.
Well, it took a long time. They changed in the process of this. Morrisville submitted their samples, and they were the first to submit their samples in the state of the water testing that they had. Subsequently, the standards that were set were lowered, and other communities opened, and it took Morrisville quite a number of days to be treated the same way as everybody else. And the issue really was not with agriculture, it was with the different agencies in the state.
Other things flood related, we did receive calls, from people, saying that they had water in their gas tanks from getting gas from gas stations that were underwater. Of those complaints that we received, our weights and measures staff, did go out to test those fuel tanks, those storage at the different gas stations, and we did not find water in those. So I don't know if it was a timing issue or what, but we did field calls on that and followed up with it. And then our animal health section, they did a tremendous amount of work with assisting other agencies, nonprofits and others with people that were displaced and also their animals. And so the actual animal caring of those, where they would be located and things like that, like long term. So when other parts of our agency in the state were shifting to recovery, our animal health group was still fielding a lot of calls, and whether it was people displaced from their animals or then getting into feed issues and things like that. So that was a continual evolving topic. Beyond the flood, just our normal everyday work, that our division thrives on being under the radar. We're doing our job, protecting food safety in the public. You never hear about us, and that's fine by us. We want to do our job behind the scenes and keep things moving. For dairy, we did almost 4,000 inspections this past year. So it's both processing and on the farm side. So we stayed very, very busy with that. We continue doing ratings that certifies our farms and our processors as grade A, which is what allows our milk and dairy products to leave the state. And so that's a critical item for our state and our economy. About 80% of our milk is still being exported out of state for processing, and 63% of our fluid milk leaves the state to go to New England to be processed. And about 82% of our products and milk ends up going out of state for consumption. So we need that grade A standard to be able to allow that avenue to keep flowing.
So how much grade A flows whole out of the state?
Fluid milk is at around 63%. Just fluid milk that's getting processed into other products. So that's straight from the farm and going out of state to other processing facilities. For dairy, this year, 2024, marks the 100-year anniversary of the Pasteurized Milk Ordinance, which is where our dairy regulations come from. It's the oldest food safety document we have. So there will be a lot of promotion going on this next year from FDA, trying to help re-educate the public in why this document even exists. And they're also going to be highlighting different states each week of the year, and so Vermont's going to be highlighted next week on social media. So it's exciting. And then also the National Conference on Interstate Milk Shippers, which is a national conference involving both regulatory, industry, and FDA with our regulations and other things, and that's agreements that allow the milk to cross state lines. It's run by an executive board, and I was elected to that board this year, so it's been 14, almost 15 years since Vermont had a seat on that board, so it's nice that we have national representation. And I'm also the first female from Vermont to be on the board, so I'm excited about that.
Should brief you on parfait sometime. On a national debate about what a parfait is. It's fascinating, some of this work. She's not without controversy. You think a parfait would be simple? It's
No.
not.
Amazing seeing grown adults yelling at each other over, is this a parfait? No, this is. And it's like, whew, okay. We gotta calm down a little bit. We can figure this out. So
Bigger issues to deal with.
it's bigger issues, but yes. So
For you though, it's great.
for weights and measures, we've been very busy this past year with electric vehicle, the EV, and those monitoring the chargers and whatnot. You all helped pass funding for an additional position that we have, an inspector that we're training on now, so thank you so much for that. We also had appropriations for the equipment to actually be able to test the meters, and so we have that equipment. And we are working on rolling out technical resources, education material and things like that, and what we will actually be doing as we move forward and trying to license these and be able to check meters. So there's been a tremendous amount of work going on in our state and nationally on this evolving new demographic that needs to be inspected and make sure when people are paying, like how many kilowatts an hour are they actually getting, and is that what they're paying for? And just the same as when you go to the gas pump and how many gallons are you getting for that price amount. So our produce team, which is our party of one, has been working on their food safety inspections on vegetable fruit producers, and then also doing maple inspections in retail stores, making sure that what's being offered for sale in maple is actually meeting grade standards. And we also receive complaints that we follow up on when we see an item in a store that's claiming like as an ingredient like maple, and it's actually not real maple. So we have a pretty good track record of being able to follow up with companies and make sure that they're properly branding it. So.
Have you ever checked almond milk to see if it was real milk or not?
It's not, Bobby. Vermont has provided a lot of testimony on how we feel FDA should be addressing that issue. So that's still a not happy topic.
I was in the store last night and it's in the dairy case.
I know. I know.
Interesting.
So that is a ever evolving topic that we're still providing feedback on to FDA because they are the ones that have the authority to enforce on that. So, yep. You know how to bring up Bobby, sore subjects with me.
We were talking about maple being real maple, so it kind of fit in.
Yeah, it was a good one.
It'd be like carrots not being carrots.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly feel you on that, Bobby. Senator Starr, excuse me. For our meat inspection crew, they completed just over 2,500 inspections, which the meat industry is the most regulated industry that we have. Like those operations cannot operate without an inspector there. So you all also helped approve us adding 2 additional inspectors that we greatly needed. And we have filled those positions and we're very appreciative for that. And they're hitting the ground running with a lot of training and getting good work done.
Is that the meat business picked up in Vermont? The output of slaughtered beef and.
I don't know on like total like pounds or tons that would be measured out on that, but we have increased facilities, people that are reaching out with interest in trying to be involved in this. So we're looking forward to this year, hopefully having licensed a trailer that could move around to assist with slaughter, which will help like on-farm slaughter bulls.
We're getting back into the trailer business.
One person looks like they are. So
Private?
yes.
Oh.
So not the agency.
And this is non-poultry, so this is,
No.
so this is significant for, rumen, so it's a sheep, goat.
Yeah.
And it's not the design I've seen is it's basically a souped up, jacked up, pickup truck. They meet standards. So it's not, you're not hauling something big or long.
Yeah.
It could go from farm to farm, which will help some of our smaller farmers, which we've been trying to do.
Yep.
Because with the, brick and mortar places, it's throughput. So this is pretty exciting and he's building it now and hopefully this year will come online, but fingers crossed it's gonna come on.
And I think it will help a group of producers that have felt underserved or not able to get to slaughterhouses and other things. So.
Yeah, the small producers have had a heck of a time trying to get a spot where, that would be good.
And then for our animal health group, they've still been busy, unfortunately, with high path avian influenza. So since 2022, we've had 3 different outbreaks. We had one just a month ago. So that's still on the radar. It's still around the country. It's following our migratory birds, and we're encouraging the public to not mix their poultry with wildlife birds, because that's how we're seeing it's being passed on and transmitted. So still trying to push that message, and they're just doing continued work on a daily basis, and trying to prevent the spread of diseases and other things like that.
So, one issue that you haven't hit on, last year we put through a 6.9 million for the organic dairy guys. And, but we fell short
Yes,
by
sir.
a little bit.
Mhm.
And, so I think there was 4 farms maybe that,
Mhm.
3 that didn't get any payment, 1 got partial.
Mhm.
Do you have a number on what it would take to cover those last 4?
I have it, but not off the top of my head. I can get that to you all. I can send it to Linda, and I know Anthony was
Give me a few minutes, I can probably track it down for you.
Yeah, I can share with you what the number is. I just asked Laura about it this morning. So it's $252,203 would be the necessary
252?
252, 203. So that would cover the 4 that have not been fully paid.
So
Did
we
you get that number, Richie?
I didn't,
Huh?
I didn't,
You better.
252.
I'm counting on you to do at least a little bit.
No, I think between the 2 of us,
We'll figure it out.
we gotta get 2 more votes.
Yes, we do.
No, we were so close on those numbers and it wasn't anyone's fault. If you're a couple 100,000 off on 7 million, that's pretty close, so.
Yeah, and Senator Starr, we did a deep dive. Amy and I in particular spent more time than I wanted to on spreadsheets with this, but trying to figure out where we were short, because we had requested, when you all were asking for this last session, from the milk purchasers and the cooperatives for the pounds. And so the issue was found in that not all of the cooperatives, when they sent their numbers, it included all of the producers. So that was part of the issue.
So maybe we should get the money out of them.
Yeah, there you
I don't know how they feel about that.
I do know that the administration is presenting their budget adjustment in the House today. Is that number within the budget adjustment
No.
for the administration?
No, I think when we talked, we were gonna go through the e-board, that was my,
Yeah, in the beginning, and then the e-boards never met. Since, this all floated to the top.
well, that'd be helpful, maybe we can discuss strategy on or find it.
So is that, it's not in the governor's?
It's not in there.
Well, it would, where we need to work on that budget adjustment.
Well, I understand that. Is there a commitment within the administration to help us find it?
I need to have that discussion.
Other questions, what about the number of farms? I think I read that we dropped a little bit below 500.
Yep, so total cow dairies right now is 491. We have 6 sheep, so we maintain that number. We were at 4 for a while. We've had a few new sheep farms come on, and right now we're at 37 goat dairies.
37.
Some of them have dried off for the season, so when I expect this spring, like we'll be back up in the mid-40s when they come back online. So that's more typical for the goat dairies being seasonal. So I am seeing a lot of farm transitions, which is a positive thing. farms that were in a grandparent's or parent's name transitioning to an LLC for the next generation to take it over. I've seen a significant uptick in that, which is positive that at least things, family planning and other things transitioning and maintaining the dairies that we have. So,
Cause I don't know, I read 56-year-olds, the average farmer age or something in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to get that number, yeah.
So-
Yep. Other questions for Evie? Good,
well, thank you, Senator Starr and everyone else. I appreciate it.
yeah, thank you. Who would you like, Steve or so?
We, I don't know if you've met, maybe we can go to the lab if it's okay.
Alright.
A little bit about what's happening at the lab,
Yeah, that would. be
and we have a
good.
new lab director. I don't think you were here during last session, so.
Are you out of Randolph or?
I am, sir. My name is Cheryl Achilles. I'm the new Vermont Agency of Agriculture and Environmental Laboratory Director. I just started in September of this year. So I'm still learning, so forgive me if I can't answer all your questions out of the gate. I came from the Vermont Department of Health Laboratory and I oversaw that microbiology program, a lot of COVID testing in the last 3 years, and subsequent pandemic scale outbreaks such as Mpox and highly pathogenic avian influenza that Evie talks about, etc. I interacted with the Agency of Agriculture pretty deeply already with Evie's group, Steve's group, etc. So anyways, to talk about what we have done in the last 6 months or so, our lab hired 1 new staff for our sample receiving group. That's new to the agency as a position. So we were able to not add any more staffing, just kind of borrow from an existing position, kind of reorg. So our budget didn't increase at all. That was a success. And she started a week before the flood hit. So she's also learning, so July. Our microbiology lab is exploring a expansion into testing for cheese pathogens. And that's in working with Evie's group. So we're looking at helping looking at testing aged products and ready for sale to monitor the safety of raw milk cheese makers and dairy co-ops. So for E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, and Staph aureus are kind of the big pathogens we're looking to target and hoping to start that up by March of this year. So that's ongoing right now. We also got a new plate washer instrument that helps to monitor the water quality, taken over from the health department for cyanobacteria testing or blue algae, as a lot of people know it. So that helps with turnaround times and better reporting results. That just was installed in December. We also have a new instrument that we're slowly replacing older aging instruments, and we're trying to do it thoughtfully. So our inorganic chemistry program has a new instrument that is currently under the purchasing contract procedure right now. We're looking to improve our phosphorus testing. We have an old instrument that the manufacturer is no longer supporting called the Latchet. It's been a heavy workhorse for a lot, and now we're moving to a new technology because that's what's the best available. So we're hoping to purchase that soon and get that up and running to help monitor better water quality as well. Our organic chemistry section has also been busy working on PFAS in water. So we're looking to do EPA method 533 in drinking water. And the reason we picked that was it was a more robust method. There's 2 drinking water methods. We picked the more robust of the 2 to get a better bang for your buck and hopefully more helpful to our programmatic clients on both the Agency of Agriculture and Agency of Natural Resources side of the table. We also, I don't know if you realize, we had implemented PCB analysis in early spring of 2023. We did about 40 samples in total, and suddenly samples stopped coming. So we're not quite sure. We have to have discussions with the Agency of Natural Resources to figure out what happened there. However, we also in the process took advantage of the gap in sampling and was able to purchase a new instrument that was about 11 years old, so about Hurricane Irene aged instrumentation. And we're in the process of revalidating that. So hopefully in about 6 weeks, we'll be able to get that up and going. So that'll help with turnaround times and things like that. So fingers crossed, no hiccups. And we also underwent, we also have to maintain accreditation. This is one of those silent things that others don't realize. But in order to maintain our water accreditation, we have to undergo an inspection audit every 2 years. So New Hampshire ELAC, or the New Hampshire Environmental Lab Accreditation, is our accrediting body. And so we underwent that inspection last spring and passed. And we also have to undergo health department inspection, if you will. So we were able to pass that as well in September. So we were able to continue water testing without a stop in testing. I think that's all I have.
Yeah, a few years ago, we visited the lab. Some of us on the committee did. And it's very interesting what you do there and how it all works.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a good afternoon.
I appreciate that.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cheryl, who does the New Hampshire testing? If they do ours, do we do theirs?
No, so the New Hampshire ELAB accrediting body has to answer to a higher authority, a federal level inspection.
Okay.
So they undergo certain criteria in order to be able to be inspectors to go around. So the health lab where I came from, we also have the same accrediting body for our water quality testing there. Also, same inspector even.
Yeah.
Go figure. So it's, yeah, it'll be a good transition for me. I already know how the inspectors are. I kind of know the pitfalls and how to help our current lab
Improve or
Improve.
update.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's good. Any other questions for Cheryl? Well, thank you for.
Good job. Fun watching a musical.
Yeah.
Steve, you want to?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Steve.
Come on in.
Good morning.
Sure, I'll keep doing
How are the bees?
Well, it's like a lot of things, it's complicated. Not necessarily a headline for every kind of a statement, but no, we have, we just issued a report on it, actually, published it, and put it on our website, that the number of colonies that are registered in the state is a record high. So, as of right now, we have about 18,000 colonies in the state. 19,000.
19,000?
Yeah, and I was looking at a document back from 2009, and there were 9,000 registered. So the numbers are going up. It's still a difficult thing to keep a colony surviving and healthy. There's lots of things that can affect them, but that's the purpose of the program, is to assist beekeepers in protecting the health of the bees. We register the bees, we inspect the bees. But yeah, so there's, like I said, it's not a simple answer. There are issues for sure with maintaining. It's like all of agriculture, it's complicated and it's hard work. Got to give a lot of credit to the beekeepers and other farmers for persisting and sticking it out, being this successful as they are. So.
But the problem is not just here in Vermont, right?
Yeah. I mean, the apiary industry has changed dramatically over the last 20 years as a result of varroa mite.
Yeah.
And the the parasite itself is a problem, but also there are a number of viruses that it transmits. And then, of course, you've got all the other things that are going on with climate change and landscape changes, crop changes, and everything else that happens. So, beekeepers have their hands full for sure.
Yeah.
They're,
Now, would the flooding have any effect on bees?
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, reduced forage, flooded some colonies. Any other bee yards ever lost?
Is it the bumblebee is the one that will work in the rain and the other ones don't really work in the rain?
Is that, you got me there.
I think, I think, it has an impact because it rains. So
Yeah.
they're not going out and working, just like
Yeah, well-
the rest of us.
None of us like to get out in that rain.
Yeah, good, right. So I think there's I
Yeah.
think in my tours this summer, there was that impact of the flooding, not only
There's
some
rain, yeah.
pipes, went down the river, but also that they did not work as hard. But my understanding is, I know this from the cranberries, the bumblebee is really hard. They'll work in any kind of conditions. The bumblebee, because they're very valuable for the cranberries box. That's my limited knowledge.
So bees don't like working in the rain.
Sure.
I don't mind weekends, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, I'm just curious, you mentioned it went from 9,000 to 19,000.
18.
Is it that there are more folks doing it, or are the operations just getting larger? Much like dairy, there's
Yes.
fewer farms, but they're bigger.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. Yeah, the number of apiaries has stayed pretty stable, but the number of colonies they manage has increased. And, as a matter of, being able to produce enough to survive economically,
Yeah.
they've had to increase the number of colonies.
So are the beekeepers gonna be coming in here and asking for a lot of updates, or are they pretty happy with the way things are going?
It remains to be seen, I think. They're definitely passionate about what they do, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
but, we're the regulatory agency for them, so we register and we inspect them and we just report the numbers that exist.
Yeah.
So, that's-
So you don't have a sense of like what they're feeling, whether or not they're feeling losses from flooding?
Some beekeepers are, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then the other area we can talk about is the Agricultural Innovation Board.
Right.
We talked about that last year. So the board has been meeting monthly. We've had primarily focusing on the issue of the neonicotinoid treated seeds.
Yeah.
Had 17 meetings, heard from a lot of experts, looked at a lot of data. Sarah, I just sent you, Tuesday, I think, sent you the report.
The report.
Yeah, so, and we, it might be appropriate to set up a separate discussion about that, because there's a lot of information in there to talk about.
Yeah, New York State, I think, just passed a law that
Right.
prohibits, or it's going to prohibit the use of neonics by, I don't know, 2020.
Well,
or something.
2029 now.
No, it's true.
Yeah,
Got
change
bumped
it
up
there.
a couple of
Right, and
years.
that's another, it's related to what the Ag Innovation Board was doing, and I think, we can get into some real detail there.
Yeah.
About what they're doing and why they're doing it, and how it affects us. But I think the board did an excellent job considering everything and coming up with a set of recommendations. And what it boiled down to is working with UVM and the farming community to identify ways to mitigate any potential risks. And a big part of it is working to improve pollinator habitat. Because that's an area that I think we have a lot of opportunities to do things, and it solves a number of problems, not just for the managed pollinators, but also for the native pollinators.
I think we're gonna plan to have you folks come in
Okay,
in regards to your report, and I think, you folks are should be the experts, I would hope, on this issue and in directing us on what we should and should not be doing.
Mhm.
And the big issue, I think, is gonna be if we deal with doing away with neonates,
Mhm.
what's gonna take its place, and is it gonna do its job? Is it gonna, how's that may affect the environment, in the bees and
Right.
everything else, and
Right.
so I would expect that we'll be talking with you folks about that as we move forward, this session.
Yeah, thank you. Like, that'd be a good opportunity to get into some real detail.
Yeah.
On that. And then, well, unless there's any other, I mean, you got other folks that have things they need to present, we can talk about this later.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Anything else you wanna bring up?
Just one, I guess one item of information, we were just, we've added, an agrochemical toxicologist, to our division, who, will actually work across the agency on toxicological issues. That'll be a good resource for us.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think we're down to water quality.
We're up to it.
Yeah.
Hello,
Let's see you.
Laura DePietro, the Director of the Water Quality Division at the agency. So I'll be relatively brief, but we continue to run all the programs that we've always run, right? Providing technical assistance and financial assistance to farms. The funding overall is up because we've had ARPA opportunities. We've also gotten federal money to help support some things. So the new things in that world, I think that are interesting are, at least in my tenure at the Agency of Agriculture, there's never been someone who's specifically focused on grazing at the Agency of Agriculture. I've read some history, and I know that we've always had different people long ago, but I've been there 20 years, and this is our first one that we got. So we were able to write a grant for federal funding and get a position that's, it's temporary at this point in terms of a limited service position, but we have a person now that's focused on grazing at the Agency of Agriculture. The other really cool thing about what we did there was we applied for this. It was a Grazing Lands Initiative grant that USDA put out, and several other partners in Vermont also got funding. So there's a little over $1 million that was brought to Vermont specifically for grazing. So now there's this cohort. And for the years prior to that, last couple of years, we had, through one of our grant program opportunities, we had worked with UVM to put in place a grazing coordinator position as well. So now all of these organizations have some resources. We've got funding to support someone to help centralize that, and then we've got someone within the Agency of Ag to be a part of that. So I'm pretty excited, and it's all connected. We work with Laura Ginsberg and the work there with the Dairy Innovation Center. So that's exciting because there are a lot of folks that are starting to work on grazing. We've actually shifted some of our programs to help with improved grazing. So to provide financial benefit when people have longer standing grass, they're not grazing right to the base. So that's a new thing in our world in some ways. We also have our grant program that we had kind of carved a little bit of money aside. We called it the Pasture Surface Water Program. But we never really had someone to run it, right? It was just this idea of let's carve some little money off, and every year it was oversubscribed. So now this person can help also attend to the needs of the folks that are demanding that program and continue to grow it. In other spaces outside of the technical and financial assistance that we do, I would say this last year, the heavy workload for us has been in two general areas as far as new workload. One is just working with municipalities. We had a lot of talk last year about stormwater, right? So we've spent a lot of time with them talking about stormwater and how that works. And it is going okay, but it is definitely a learning lesson for all of us, I think, to navigate how to figure out what gets charged for stormwater and what does not. But we've got an open dialogue and we've worked with them. So I think
Does that stormwater on farms or agricultural land, or is it just general,
Well, stormwater on a farm is not going to fall under the municipal
no,
fee structure. But what happens is a great example, we had down in Burlington at the Ethan Allen site, there is a community farm. And there's also, I forget if it's a museum or what it is there that's, you know, public space that's for people to go and do other activities. And the parking area is for both. So what is the parking area? You know, so it's those kinds of very detail-oriented things that we're trying to navigate with the municipalities to understand it. But on a clear farm, it's very, you know, it's relatively easy.
I just back up the grant programs that you run for grazing, the new position. How is the world gonna change that? Because if you have a grazing plan, UVM would come in, they'd say, this is what the grazing plan looks like. Here's the steps that you need to take, and so how is it gonna change with the new position?
Yeah, well, I think just there's an ag water quality partnership, which is UVM, NRCS, which is a big player in this.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
usually a lot of stuff that NRCS doesn't fund, you come in and fund.
Correct.
So it's this mishmash of everything that comes together, and UVM did the plan for the grazing. So how's that all changing?
Yeah, so UVM had just a few resources. They had, I believe, don't quote me on this, but about 2 positions. One of them has moved on to a different role. So there wasn't an enormous capacity for the number of farms in Vermont that are actually interested in grazing and getting grazing plans. The person with NRCS had retired a few years ago that used to do that, and they had replaced it, but I think it hasn't come up to what it, you know, in terms of the capacity to meet as well as just one position. So I think this just helps build that, continue to build that capacity to work with people to develop these grazing plans that then NRCS can build into contracts, or we can backfill, like you said, where there are opportunities just to do easier opportunities, not to do a bigger, you know, especially for a farm that's already well along on the grazing plan world, to help them with projects that they want to do. So I just see that it's going to, we've had people call, no one's there to help. I think that there'll be more people to help with all of the opportunity that came with that grant to other organizations and ourselves. That's my hope, is that people will actually have some, because it's one thing to set up a grazing plan, it's another thing to follow through with someone and give them that mentor support, and I think that that's what this will do, is to provide people you can call and say, I've been going through it, and now I need a little more conversation, please. And more workshop opportunities to develop educational events and things like that. So, anyways, with the municipalities, the other space, not just stormwater, but a farm, what is a farm? And now with the accessory on farm business and just, you know, a lot of the places in statute where there might be an exemption for agriculture defining what is that farm. And so a lot of people look to the agency of ag to say, is that a farm? And, you know, we help where we can, but the workload is up. Basically everybody who has to interpret this is looking at us trying to navigate, you know, do I need to give them a permit for this activity or not from like a municipal focus? So we're going to start over the next year. Actually, the next meeting kicks off, our first meeting kicks off this Friday, of working with the municipalities and the LCT to try and open the dialogue to have all of these conversations about the interfaces between farms and municipalities and navigate how to get clarity, education, and consistency across the state so that farms can understand and municipalities can understand how to navigate it.
a question, I think it came up yesterday, maybe. We have a property in Essex, about 3/4 of an acre. And that's in Irene's district. And they have 100 ducks. And it's considered a farm. And so when you talked about, you know, what is a farm, it seems like that has caused a lot of concern in Essex, that person bringing in 100 ducks and being considered a farm, so.
We spent a lot of time in that space, which I'll call, you know, micro farming in some ways. it's these very small lots that have farms that can actually generate more than $2,000 annually, which is the threshold, which then defines them as farm.
Is that 2,000 federal issue or state issue?
The federal is actually 1,000, if I recall. It's state, it's 2,000.
Because if I remember right, that's been there for forever. And a dollar used to be, at least 75 cents. Now a dollar's about 10. Maybe that should be changed.
Yeah, we haven't had challenges as much with people trying to meet that. So if it were up to $8,000, $10,000, it would certainly, I think, limit some people that would be farms. But it is an interesting dynamic, and we've spent a lot of space and time in that space because there are homesteaders who want to teach that agricultural ethic to their children. And, are they a farm? And people are moving into Vermont next to folks, and they don't necessarily like hearing the animals at night. And so there's just the conflict is what brings it to our attention, and then we get involved to make a determination. So we're going to continue to work in that space because it is, a lot of folks, it gets into the nuisance activities and that other conversation as well. So just trying to work person to person so that we can navigate these and hopefully get resolution versus more frustration with folks. The other interface that we have spent a lot of time in the last year, a couple of years ago, so the idea of waste being brought to farms to be able to manage them from society's generation of them. And so we have now within our division what we call the non-sewage waste program, which is material that comes onto a farm in a digester or a pit. So stuff that's usually liquid, going into these things and then being incorporated into the farm's nutrient management plan and applied on the farm. That space opened up a lot, and then in addition, in the same vein, there's composting on farms, right? Either with chickens or without chickens, there's different new thresholds. So what is a farm when it comes to those definitions that exist? So those two worlds, non-sewage waste and the compost farming, interact a lot with solid waste over at DEC. So we've spent a lot of time trying to navigate that because as farms might transition to becoming solid waste facilities, we want to make sure that that transition is smooth. Because there's like for instance, the amount of food residuals, so the food scraps essentially that are brought onto farms, if you go over it, you bump into solid waste. And so if all of a sudden you needed different infrastructure or setup or whatever, the reporting completely different, we want to try and make it aligned so that it's not a whole new world when you go over. So we continue to work in that space, continue to work with them, but there definitely it's all new. And there's a lot of pieces to work through. You can never make up what you didn't know you had to figure out. So we spent a lot of time in that world.
Is there any way of knowing the number of people that qualify as a farm? They're down at that $2,000 level. Is there any way of measuring or knowing the number?
The census is probably your best answer. It's an interesting space because historically a farm was a farm and no one had to ask if it was a farm.
Yeah.
Right? And so this idea that we created a couple of years ago because people would call us and ask all these questions and we'd say, here's the threshold, see if you meet one. And we'd go through it and spend a lot of time talking to people, and then the town would call us as well. And so we created a form and said, fill this out so we can get this information. That way we don't have to keep taking on these phone calls. And maybe you can figure it out yourself and then just respond to the town and let them know, hey, I figured out I am. It has created this space where they're like, oh, the agency now makes these decisions. And we don't. We just try to provide the guidance to people to say, here's how you can figure out if you're a farm or not. And frankly, if you sold $2,000 this year and next year you didn't, you're not, and we're not going to be able to track that, right? So it's a service that we did to try and provide education and outreach, and now it's looking as if it's a thing we do where, we make a decision that something is a farm. So I don't have data because it's not, the real obvious farms are not coming to us and asking for a farm determination because no one's asking them, are you a farm? They can see the cows in the barn. So I don't really have data unless there's essentially a conflict is typically why it comes up to me and a determination gets made. So I don't think it would be representative of the universe.
In last year, we we said that a farm, I believe, does not have to pay municipal stormwater runoffs if it has to meet the BMPs.
RAPs, yeah.
RAPs. And of course, the League of Cities and Towns still beaten on that to some extent, but I thought that what got put into the bill was it would be reviewed and talked about again this year. But in reviewing what we actually passed, there isn't anything about a review and it's just farmers don't have to pay that, so
Yeah,
hopefully.
And I think it's important that we just clarify the law. That was the law was just clarified, and farmers are paying a fee. It was whether they were gonna be double dipped or I understand that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they cost them money to be regulated by us because we
Yes.
manage all the practices. And some of the farms, the medium and large, are paying an annual fee to us to be permitted by us. And so it was that the law, the way the law is written is it gave, this is my interpretation, I'm not a lawyer, but it gave DEC the authority to do stormwater where they don't otherwise have authority, and then DEC transferred that to these municipalities. But DEC doesn't have stormwater authority over farms, and so it was confused once it got to the municipality of what the original authority was, essentially. But we've been working with municipalities, and we've said, look, like, work with your farms that you have, talk with them, and essentially when you really don't understand if it is or isn't, then, you know, we'll happily step in, we can go take a look at the farm, we can figure out what's going on and give you a better insight. But if you can answer these general questions, you can find out if it's a farm and essentially build a relationship with your local farm in your community and figure out what's going on in their operation. Because there may be a barn that's a mechanic shop for a lawnmower business, right? Or something like that that's absolutely not tied to the vegetable production in some way. So they just got to navigate that building by building because they are literally going building by building to charge some of these fees. So the smaller you get in these spaces, these parcels may have some that gets charged stormwater fees and some that says it's under the agricultural side. And especially when you get into accessory on farm business, you know, there's spaces where we'll go onto a farm or a parcel and we only regulate over here, not necessarily over there. So it's definitely changed in my tenure at least about what it means to walk onto a farm and figure out what you're looking for in terms of regulatory oversight. So anyways, the other thing that I just want to remind you that we did that I think is going really well is a couple of years ago, for large farms, we split off the permitting into a separate position that also, bless you.
Thank you.
That also covers all of the nutrient management work that comes in for those large farms. So we do nutrient management reviews of these farms every year. And then we also do the permitting. And we had some backlogs with permitting, if you recall. That has helped us just be able to push that through. So hopefully you haven't heard any complaints. We've been processing things and going through and frankly having a better, deeper dive on being able to assess these applications when they come in. So I think we've been a lot more timely there. And then on our inspection side, we have been crushing inspections. We were able to build a new database over the last couple of years, and it's shortened things, it's made it more efficient, and we've been able to just get around and turn around projects really quickly so that people can see their report, get their information, and be able to fix things. So hopefully as well you haven't heard any complaints in that space on our timeliness.
So that's all going quite well.
I think it's going, I mean, we're not perfect all the time, right? But I think compared to where it was, it is absolutely light and day better.
And, well, I haven't received really any negative calls in regards to that. And, I have received, a couple of calls in regards to, manure spraying. And I think you folks got that worked out, so that's fine, or working under a special permit.
Yes, we worked with farms. So I spent well, let me back up. So about late August, the farmers actually came to us on the manure situation based on all of this flood and rain talk that we've had here today. and explained that they were concerned because they were making choices that early in the season to not get on their fields and not spread because they were thinking that's not the right choice in this moment, right? They're trying to make the right choice, but you can't predict the future. You have no idea when the rain's gonna stop, and frankly, it never did. And even when it did, it takes days for the wind to blow and the sun to shine and the ground to not be saturated. And so anyways, they communicated with us. They actually asked Secretary Moore and Secretary Tebbetts to come meet with all the farmer watershed groups. That was maybe in November. And so they were very engaged and very concerned that they knew that they were creating a backlog because normal grass applications of manure were not able to occur during the summer. So I continue to work with those farmers and the custom applicators because in Vermont, a lot of manure is managed by custom applicators, which are the for hire spreading folks. And so we knew as we went into it, they kept holding off, trying to wait for better weather, and it just didn't come. So we knew once we came to the December 15th date, which is the ban in the state, that there was likely a backlog that needed to be managed. So it has been better these last few weeks, and it was very timely because we were able to process and do exemptions. So we've done about 51 exemptions to farmers to allow them to be able to spread some manure, which is a record, frankly.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Normal, we had 0 last year. I think it was 4 the year before and 0 the year before that, just as examples. So it was indicative of it was not an easy year. And we've asked them to collect a lot more water. We've also, Heather Darby can share with you, they went around and they sampled the manure. The manure has 75% less phosphorus in it. So it's water. And I'm hearing anecdotally from, they all get charged per gallon.
Why would the phosphorus be down so much?
Because it's so diluted. The custom applicators say they're moving about twice as much volume for the same farms. They know these farms, they know how much volume they move on a regular basis. So the challenge is that the workload is really up and the concentration of nutrients is really down. And so it's been tough for them for certain. But of all of the things, we've only had one that has gotten to water, and otherwise we haven't had any concerns that I am aware of otherwise. Other than just people saying someone's spreading, I don't think they're supposed to. But they have, we explained that there's an exemption process.
And have they got the pits down where they've got ample space until summer?
Yeah, that's the focus right now, is just to make sure people have storage, because if we got into a situation where we've got a foot of snow and we've got overtopping storage, we really don't have any options. And especially if it's going into water on a daily basis.
Yeah. And are any of the permits, are they still asking for permits, or is that pretty much?
It is dwindled significantly. I think we're probably at the, past the peak for certain.
Yep.
Nobody wants to be out there right now. That's my experience, and I can sympathize with them. I would not want to be out there trying to deal with frozen manure.
Well, in the fields, we're just gonna mark them all up and cut them up if they did get out there, and they have tires as wide as this table to try to, not do that, and so.
Well, a lot of them spent years trying to build their soil health, work on all of this, and it was very challenging for them to navigate having spent so much investment in their fields to do all of this water quality work.
Any other questions for Laura? Thank you.
Well, I think that's, most of us. I think we've got, we do have the invitation, and maybe Steve wants to, we're inviting to an Ag Producers Day that's coming up here at the State
Yes,
House.
on the 17th.
17th.
Yeah.
And if you want to just talk a little bit about what you had planned.
Yeah, well, it's just an opportunity for the senators' representatives to meet with representatives of the Ag Producer Associations. No agenda, just meet and greet, just so you know who's who and they know who's who.
In the afternoon?
It's after 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. in cafeteria.
That's a good idea to do.
So if you got that bee question, the Beekeepers Association representative should be there, and they'll be there, and maple sugar producers will be there.
Yeah.
And it's just a very informal way to gather information and meet with Producer Association, because we have how many? Abby, we have how many producer associations? We have quite a few.
Oh, I think like 20 some odd sort of different groups were invited to send a representative or two to the day.
And that'll be, that's a good thing to do. We used to, some of you at the agency, we used to do an Ag Day thing in room 11 years back. And of course, things changed over the years. So the other issue that we haven't talked about, I was wondering, a report from Eastern States, how, what kind of a year did they have this year? And
Yeah.
And I
I
know,
think we did, I think the companies did well.
Yes, we had over 30 vendors in the building in West Springfield this past fall. Over the 17 days, they had just under 2 million in sales, which broke previous year records. So even though the weather was not very cooperative and, consumers were just sort of getting back into the flow of being places in person and gathering at the Biggie again, it was actually a really productive, really successful year. So we had record-breaking attendance on certain days, and I think it was 1.9 million in sales. So it was great.
the day I was there a couple of days, and Vermont building was really busy, and if you go to all the buildings to visit, our building kind of stands out, I would say.
Well, and we hope that it will even more so. So it'll be 100 years old in 2029. And the vision is to do a renovation, modernization of the building that addresses both some of the health and safety issues and kind of just gives it a little bit of a facelift by 2029. So there's some capital budget conversations that we'll have and a master plan that's been developed with Building and General Services around the remodel of the building that Commissioner Fitch and Secretary Tebbetts are taking a look at for the first time here in the next couple of days. So big movements
The architects
for
are
the
at work.
building.
The architects are at work designing that. Those issues of electrical, if the fire alarm goes off, it's a cascading issue of real problems. Because the fire trucks have to roll, you have to evacuate, and you spend an hour with no sales, even though it may be just a bagel that overheated, but sensitivities,
So that,
it's absolutely, so some of those issues need to be addressed. It's an old building, but we want to modernize it. We want to make sure the flow works better. That's part of the architect's work, is to make sure that when you go, you have a nice experience and you're not herded in through troughs, basically. If you want to buy a donut, you can get to it, do it nicely. So they're going to look at those things, look at the floor, lighting. So it's pretty exciting that 2029, you said, is
2029, yeah. Vision.
too far away, I guess.
no,
So you mentioned almonds, and I want to read you.
drink,
I wanted to, so Senator Starr is actually part of this. I don't know if some of you may be familiar with Rick Norcross.
It's a great song.
Rick is a Vermont performer. He had the food show in Burlington, or food shows for fashionable, and he's a wonderful musician. Well, I ran into him one time and I told him he should write a song about milk can only come from cow, right? So he's written the song. It's called Moo Cow Milk, and it's celebrating also he would go around the state in his pickle, the Mighty Pickle, which has now been restored in
Tennessee is.
it's sort of Mississippi. It's down there. Marty Stewart, I believe Marty Stewart purchased it, just put it in a museum. It came up for the launch of his latest CD, and I think this is maybe his last one he wants to do. But it's got some wonderful music in it. But the lyrics of Moo Cow Milk, you may recognize one of the participants that's around this table.
I've got copies for you.
Irene is here.
Not me.
So I've got, and I also got Edible Vermont, and this year's is the liquid assets issue. So as we head into the session here, yeah, I think you might enjoy reading about some of those. Is that enough? Is that
Thank
good
you.
enough?
Yeah.
So in your commute, you want to pop it in if you still
Yeah,
have the
that-
CD.
Oh, I've heard it.
And there's one about COVID and the governor in there as well.
Who has a CD in
I
their
know, who has
car?
a CD player?
I do.
Yeah, you're a little old fashioned, aren't you?
Irene's got one.
I'm gonna Google it. Yeah, I'll find it online, yeah.
Okay, and Rick just wanted to make sure you had it, so.
Well, that's pretty nice of him to send copies to
I like it, but I don't know where.
I discovered mine, I've got a 9-year-old something, can't remember, but I have my machines in there. So I've got one. You may have one, you don't know it.
I don't, well, I might. Are you saying I'm technically challenged?
all that stuff's coming back. All that stuff that people with vinyl now is a big thing.
Yeah, it is.
My 22-year-old son is into vinyl now.
But this is post final.
That's right.
Come back.
Yeah.
So, are we
Yeah.
done?
Yeah.
Say hello to Vicky.
I will.
Don't get to see her every day now.
So anyway, we just had a wonderful session. Thank you, and we got a lot of heavy issues, and we'll get through it, as they say.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably be meeting later to talk about any updates to any procedures that you folks work on. And, I think last year we had a pretty productive season. It's just bad to keep seeing our dairy numbers go down. We're fairly fortunate that the production numbers stay up pretty good. Is the DMC program, that's been a tremendous help to probably all of our dairy guys. Do you ever get any reports on that, or?
Yeah, and I think, you may know the payments, they haven't launched their enrollment for this year yet, they're waiting for that. But this year,
Organic and
Generally, I would say the payments this year were more than the year before, because,
Yeah,
it's a formula with feed cost and also the price of milk. So
well,
people were getting payments more this year than they were last year, the year before.
well, yeah, I think it brought in
No, and you,
millions.
and
but
you were very helpful in having to pay that premium as well. That was really quite helpful that year.
Well, yeah,
That was a big deal.
I don't know. It's gonna be important, I think, to try to get those numbers and the projected price numbers out into the future. So we can hopefully get some help, this coming year. But money is gonna be a lot tighter this year than it has been because of the federal funds. But we'll be working closely with you folks to attract and get the numbers on. Usually if we can show that if you spend $1, you get $4 back, and have it in real money numbers, it's a lot easier to get the $1 to cover the cost. And milk prices this past year haven't been that good. And the first thing we gotta try to do is get that organic issue straightened out. And hopefully your boss will help us a little bit on that. bridging line work with our boss and try to get that.
When do you anticipate the budget adjustment coming to your side? Timeframe.
By the end of the month, wasn't it?
They said that the House hopes to have the budget adjustment over to us by the third week of January.
Yeah.
We will take testimony in Senate Appropriations, and we hope to have it as soon as it arrives here back over. It is a little unusual in the second year of a biennium because usually by this time the budget adjustment would have been, the testimony would have all been taken in the House committee. So the whole process is a little backed up this year in this place. I will say that it will be a lot lighter lift for us if either the House puts it in, the administration helps them find the money to do that, or that, because if we're left alone out there to find us, it becomes much harder.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's, just an issue that we have to deal with.
Yep.
And, then there was, I thought we did maybe an $800,000 grant to ag last year to do something that,
Training,
pardon?
is it the training thing? Were you talking
Is it the micro grants for
Yeah.
diversity,
Yeah,
for diversification? That's a little bit smaller though. I don't think it's that high, the dollar amount. That
the small farmer transition
yeah.
program?
Oh, yeah,
Didn't we put money, how's that working?
it wasn't 8 though.
It was 150,000 if
Or
we're
it got cut down, didn't it?
thinking about the same program, yeah. So it'll be launching and open for applications in January, I think, January 19th.
Yeah.
So it hasn't opened yet, but yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on that, see how, you could probably run, because we cut that, I think, over in our appropriations because we needed the money to
Mhm.
pay Peter, so we took it.
and the Maple one would be fascinating. You see the Maple grants.
Yeah.
That is going to be a fascinating, the response that we received for.
Yeah, so there was also 2.3 million to support infrastructure investments in meat, maple, and produce, and we advertised the maple component separately from meat and produce. And the maple component has about $540,000 because there was a limitation placed on how much could be committed to the maple industry. We received 332 applications asking for $18 million. So we just reviewed each of those applications 3 times. So every application has received 3 reviews. There were 63 reviewers that reviewed maple applications, and we'll start kind of going through that next week. But yeah, huge demand, focusing on climate resiliency, production efficiency, and food safety and quality improvements.
I think the biggest response we've ever received.
Yeah, and any of our economic development grants before. So we'll see what we see from produce and meat sector, but
So we're gonna disappoint a lot of people is the part that's, it's the review process is gonna be extraordinary, and it's
we will
probably.
fund 3 to 15 awards out of 331 applications.
But we will have incredible data and information about where the industry is going. That will be interesting to see
Mhm.
where the needs are.
How is,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
well, I'm just gonna, you must keep track of the maple production to some extent. That must be up, isn't it?
And USDA statistics does the tracking of that, and we're about average about 2 million gallons per year. It was down, the weather was really funky last year as well for maple. Some people paid a lot, and some people didn't pay any. It was one of those weird years
Depended on your
where your sugar
elevation.
bush was. But, you know, you can see from that, and that's a survey, so it's not, you know, it's not solid stuff, but it's, we produce about 50% of all the maple in the United States. 50% of the maple. And, you know, and it goes into how many taps we have. And you can see there's an increase in the number of taps that we have. You've seen there are people that have already made maple syrup this year, last year, or whatever. Yeah, already this season, I guess you could say, because of our weird weather we've had. So some of the bigger operations, you know, they start tapping now, so they're ready to go in February, March. And it just happens the weather triggered some of them to start making maple up your way.
Oh, yeah.
In Franklin County, they've had producers that are already made a crop. So, but there's lots of, I mean, you know, the maple industry there's a lot of innovation going on with it. A lot of people doing value added, much like how dairy has transitioned into value added. There's a lot of sauces, spirits, beer, and using maple, and it's natural.
Is that maple water, or remember we had the water?
Yeah.
It was gonna take,
California or something?
no,
Yeah,
no,
there's
it
some-
was-
It was in Connecticut, wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
Connecticut.
it came in we had
It's
Canada.
gonna take the RO water,
Right, that's right.
make it into water, I don't know.
I have not had an update on, I know what you're familiar with.
That's right.
It was a Connecticut company that was looking.
Yeah,
Some
you're
more
gonna
here.
bottle up here
Middlebury.
someplace, Middlebury,
Middlebury.
right.
And we do, you know, we have some, like sap, it's a maple carbonated.
That's right.
drink as
Sell
well,
that
so-
one.
Yeah.
So,
Sap, that's right.
so there, I mean, there's a trend there of using it in, you know, down your way, you've got Bob.
Yep.
Down your way, and he's opened up his new place. So but it will be fascinating to see that
Mhm.
some of the data that we get out of these grants, where it's headed. But it was extraordinary. I don't think, we knew there would be a lot of response, but I don't think that.
Not this much, yeah.
So, more to come, we can do deep dive on that later if you want.
No, it just, no, he basically covered it, but, maple is, it's a whole changing world. And they tap everywhere they can.
Pretty
The,
amazing.
one other issue that I thought about, and we haven't talked about even as a committee, but on the health side, the House Ag Committee does some forestry issues.
Mhm.
And on this side, in the Senate, we don't get to deal with any forestry issues, and it's all dealt with, well, we deal with it, but it's not really very official, because it's not part of our job. And, I'm wondering, do you have many forestry issues, where you deal with the Health Ag Committee rather than Health Natural Resources?
I think our closest connection to forestry is through the Working Lands Program. And through the Working Lands Program, forestry and also value-added wood products are eligible for grants. So we have funded value-added projects, wood pellets, et cetera, through that program. I think that's our closest connection. And of course, in maple, you know, occasionally we talk about, you know, tree health and all that, but that's not really in our wheelhouse either. I would say that's the only real connection that we've had.
Yeah.
Is through the Working Lands Program.
So
Because the-
maple, you don't have much to do with maple production?
Not on the production side, but
No.
more on the marketing end or promotion or,
Regulatory
Post-processing.
yeah.
density, color, flavor.
Any other questions from committee members? Irene?
I was just curious what the usual take is at the Big E for the Vermont Pavilion. Do you have a sense of whether that 1.9 million was in line with prior years or
It was
high?
higher than, because it was the record sale that
Was,
we've ever
okay.
had in the building. I don't recall what it was the year prior.
I'm surprised because I got there on Monday and the people at the admissions desk were saying, oh, we've had 3 days of rain. This is the first day anybody's shown up. So
Yeah.
if we lost 3 days, I mean, there's
Yeah,
still
it's-
more potential, obviously, in that 17-day window, right,
And-
for more
Yes.
sales.
And sometimes the rain drives people into the building too,
Well,
because
that could be.
if you actually can, if you do it right, you can go through all the Avenue of States and not actually really go outside very much at all, so you could graze your way through every building and not get outdoors. So there could be people that were, instead of eating out on the fairgrounds, because it was raining.
Yeah.
They could have come in, but it's, you never know, I mean, it's like, the weather was not the best on Vermont Day.
No.
Well,
The weekends were rough.
it was it was okay in the early morning, but by, 11 o'clock it hit.
Yeah, got a little soggy.
But if you want a deep dive on that, we have building managers that can come in and give you an idea and let you know who the vendors are and what they do and give you an update on that.
But the building was, it was very full this year. I mean, there wasn't any empty.
Yeah, we added a couple of new vendors in the back with the food trucks, and anyone that does that 17 days is
It's a
incredible.
long haul.
Oh, yeah.
It's, food for
But we
17.
you do have it set up so they can change like that.
Yeah, we have rotating booths, so some people, I think we try to get people in, maybe try 3 days, maybe do Harvest New England's one day, you get a feel for what it's like. We had, it's the franchise with the cheese on it.
Oh, the poutine.
So we had Poutine, it was their first year, and they did very well, but they were having to go back to Vermont to get more potatoes. It was like,
They didn't go to Maine to get them.
it was, and getting them processed and cut, and it was like, there was a couple of rocket runs back to Vermont to
Maine
get.
was flunking out baked
They
potatoes.
were.
And,
Every year.
yeah, no, it's good to go through there and just see how many different vendors of different kinds of products and
Yeah, you're proud of your state when you walk through that building. It's amazing the entrepreneurialism that exists in Vermont. It's really exciting.
yeah, it's commercial, but yeah, it doesn't feel like some of those other buildings where every booth there is selling things. And but to do 2 million, that's
It was really great.
busy. Yeah. Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank all of you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And, as we move through the session, if there are things that come up, I know you've never been shy in the past, so we're here to try to help. So, feel free to call any.
We'll see you this afternoon on the floor,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Get a lot of applause.
Well, I would hope. Yeah,
I'll be in
you
the
don't
back.
have to be rude or
I love when you guys walk in. One of my favorite things.
Well, we don't get applause anymore for that.
Oh, come on.
But whenever I've gone to visit a person next door, they usually walk to the door to meet us. You have to stand up. Well, we get that sometimes not. It varies, but we get along.
Oh, it's nice.
Yeah, that's right, 2:00. Yeah,
It'll be a full house.
well, I hope, should. Yeah.
Good stuff.
So thank you all
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Maybe we'll get down to the lab again this year.
You're welcome anytime.
We'll see how things work out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went.